Welcome back to Straight Talk with Dr. Erik. And today on the show, we have with us a very special individual whose name is Jason Neufeld. Well, Jason, you're here on Straight Talk. Tell me a little about yourself. What do you do?
First, Dr. Erik, thank you very much for inviting me to be on your show. It is a pleasure to be here. I have a great deal of respect for the work that you're doing, and it's really wonderful to be a guest. My name is Jason Neufeld. I'm the managing partner for a law firm called Elder Needs Law. We're based in Aventura, Plantation, Boca, and Spring Hill on the west coast of Florida. But we serve the entire state remotely. As an elder law firm, we do a few different things. Elder law is an umbrella term for multiple different areas of law. So we do things that a lot of people probably know something about, like estate planning. Who makes decisions for you if you can't make decisions for yourself? Who gets your stuff after you pass away? We do probate. So if you haven't planned properly, how do you go through that court process? We help shepherd people through that process to make it as painless as possible. What we do that's a little bit different, a little bit more nuanced and specialized is Medicaid planning. And that is working with people who have assets, and we have the ability to legally and ethically protect what they have to get them help paying for care at home, care in an assisted living facility, or care in a nursing home, and paying for prescriptions and copays and things like that. It really can alleviate a significant medical cost, long-term care cost from what they're experiencing.
So that's so huge, and thank you so much for sharing with our audience what you do. You know, we are in the dementia space, and very often the things that we come across is people don't think that something will happen. There's no planning. We all think we're invincible. We all think we're going to live forever. We all think we're going to make decisions on our own and that it won't fall on our kids or someone else. And what we often see is when people with dementia or people who are elderly transition to folks who can't make decisions on their own, that the family is shocked because they don't know how to handle it. We also find that people then, between the family dynamic, there becomes arguments, disagreements. Mom would have wanted this, mom would have wanted that. And we find that there's not enough education to the general public about what planning is. So if you, Jason, had a father who's 70 years old, he has, his memory for now, everything is good. What type of planning would you recommend, even starting with health, whether it's healthcare proxy, whether it's a living will, whether it's advanced care planning? Can you walk our audience what people should be thinking about before it gets too late?
Sure, and I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's about who can make decisions if you or my client becomes unable to make decisions for themselves. So mom or dad, sometimes that process of losing capacity is gradual, right? They have the early stages of dementia. They're still able to talk. They can have pleasant conversations. They're still highly intelligent. And at some point in time, they lose the ability to make decisions for themselves. Or they have sundowner syndrome, where sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. And that can differentiate depending on the individual. Other times, however, the transition from being independent to being completely dependent happens like that.
Like a stroke.
Exactly right. And we don't know what's going to happen. So that's why you're absolutely right. Having a plan in place in advance is incredibly important. Let's start with what I would say is I do a lot of planning. I do revocable trust, irrevocable trust, special needs trust, all these sort of fancy planning tools. There's nothing more important that I can provide to my clients than a well-drafted, durable power of attorney.
So tell us about that. Like, I hear durable power of attorney.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. So so we call it it's part of what we call incapacity planning. Who can make, there's healthcare decisions where we're looking for a healthcare surrogate designation, which in other states they call a healthcare proxy. In Florida, we call it a healthcare surrogate designation. A proxy, as an aside, is the state has a prescription for who can make healthcare decisions.
I saw that.
Don't have a plan in place.
And
yes.
Tell me if keep me honest here, that the wife, if someone's married or wife or husband takes first precedence, then I think it goes to the kids. But really, it's a judicial, right?
Yeah.
Like the court would be.
It's a legal. If there's a legal guardian.
If there's a legal guardian,
then that's the preference.
And if there's not,
then it's the spouse has the next preference, and after that is children. But if there's more than one children, it's now a majority of the children. And that's where things can get really complicated
Wow.
and confusing. And the doctors don't always know who they're supposed to be interacting
I've
with.
been in those
Yes.
situations, and they're very, very tough because let's say you have someone who is at that stage of a hospice, and then one family member says, one kid says, no, I want everything to be done. I don't want mom to be on hospice, intubate, resuscitate. Other said, mom told me she would never have wanted that.
That's
and then
right.
I'm standing here in the middle, and I'm like, who do I
Did
listen
anyone
to?
get this in writing?
Right,
'Cause
right.
it wouldn't be nice if we had it in writing
Right.
beforehand, certainly. Yes, 100%. So we have the healthcare surrogate where who can talk to the doctors, who can access medical records, who can make decisions, who can consent to treatment, withhold treatment, all these sorts of things. Then we have the power of attorney, which is essentially, think of it as everything else in your life, dealing with the government, signing contracts, dealing with your money, dealing with your real estate, dealing with a lawyer, dealing with the IRS, right? All these sort of different, there's the everyday management of your life is not going to be encompassed with a healthcare proxy or a healthcare surrogate. For that, you need a durable power of attorney. Where people get in trouble is these are not one-size-fits-all documents. And so people get in trouble when they go, I'm just going to Google and download a
That's
free
what I
form.
was thinking, or like take it
Yes.
to the next level. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to chat GPT it and say, hey, you are an elder plan attorney. I need you to do and make me a thing. But
Correct.
it doesn't work like that.
Well, you don't know until it's too late whether it works or not. Maybe it's okay, maybe it's not okay. Who knows? You're not going to try to use it until you have actually lost.
And then it could be
capacity.
too late.
Exactly. And then if you don't have a good power of attorney or an insufficient power of attorney, it's not strong enough to do what
It could be challenged.
It can be challenged, or you just might not be able to do it at all. And then you're forced into a legal guardianship situation where you have to go in front of the judge and say, Your Honor, we need to make these decisions. This power of attorney is good for example, almost every power of attorney that you'll find online or through ChatGPT is going to be fine for dealing with the bank. I just see that very commonly. Dealing with the bank, you're probably going to be fine if it's assuming it's properly witnessed and properly notarized and executed properly. That's going to be fine. What happens is there are certain things you can't do unless it's very specifically written down. In other words, you can't just say, I give my agent under this power of attorney the ability to do anything for me, so help me God, and that's it, right? And everything under the sun. You can't do that.
It has to be specific.
Correct. And not only that, there are certain powers that have to be separately initialed. So it can say all day in black and white and bolded and highlighted, I have the ability to create trust. But if that provision, it's called a superpower. There are 7 or 8 superpowers listed in the statute that if you don't have it particularly initialed properly, you can't do it.
So it could be a situation where I think, oh, I did it and I put it in Google or I got a form, but then it gets challenged because it doesn't have those intricacies. Like a lot of people like me, I'm like, look, I'm tired, leave me alone. Everything I give to my son, X and Y, let him deal with it. I give him all, but it doesn't, so it needs to be.
And then when we get into our more hyper-specialized planning for Medicaid, let's say someone comes to me and they have hundreds of thousands of dollars and they have their home and they have to figure out when they want to protect all of it to get access to these benefits, to keep them at home longer or to help pay for a facility. That's where we have lots of specialized things that we have to do. And if their power of attorney doesn't have these long-term care issues in mind, we're hamstrung. They only have, we have, let's call it a dozen different strategies we can utilize to protect assets. Well, a power of attorney might only give me access, if it's not well drafted, only 3 out of the 12 strategies. I want my clients to have the world of planning options at their fingertips. And if they don't have a good power of attorney, we're forced into guardianship court. Or not using not putting together the best possible plan for them.
Jason, it's so interesting that you mentioned this. In our work with dementia patients, we see very different families and different people and different planning. So, for example, today when I spoke to a couple, they had everything planned out. What about this? I've got it. This is the plan. This is this. My power of attorney, my healthcare, my lawyer, my counsel, got everything. And you could see peace and the calm because they know it's taken care of.
Right.
And then when certain families who don't have that education, they don't know about it, you see when they ask them that question, they get very tense because they don't know.
Right.
And they get very nervous. And they know that in the end, it's going to be a problem.
Yes.
You can't run away from it. It will be a problem.
Correct.
And having someone like you who can turn to is very, very key, is very important. I'm going to shift gears to, there's a lot of resources that the elderly and their family needs, whether it's a home attendant, whether it's an adult daycare.
Right.
And then you've mentioned something about Medicaid, right?
Yes.
How to get Medicaid. And this is actually a book that Jason, you wrote, right?
I did write it, yeah.
Right. So this is a book that Jason read, and they can get this in places. Where can they, if they want it? Amazon.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend, Jason just shared it with me, and I'm definitely going to read it because knowledge is power. But why would I want Medicaid? I've worked my life. I've always been told, Medicare is for the elderly, and Medicaid is D for the people who don't have enough resources.
Correct. The extreme impoverished.
Yeah. So why?
So let's start with the very basic fact that Medicare, which we all get when we turn 65, or if we become disabled and after waiting 2 years, if you're under the age of 65, Medicare is very limited when it comes to long-term care.
Correct.
Now,
very limited.
Very limited. If you're in a nursing facility, it pays up to 100 days. And even that's not guaranteed. First 20 days in full, and 80 out of 100 days would be subject to a copay, which may or may not be covered depending on your Medicare supplement. And that's only if you spent 3 days admitted into a hospital. And if you then go from the hospital to the nursing facility, will they pay up to 100 days? It's meant to be for short-term rehab. That's really what it's designed for, to cover. If you're in, and after 100 days, by the way, you can have the best Medicare plan known to man.
It doesn't matter.
It's done. It's done. If you're in an assisted living facility, it does not pay 1 red cent toward that.
Medicare doesn't cover at all.
Correct. Yeah? Exactly right. If you're at home, if you're prescribed the skilled care, you can get some unskilled care, but it's typically not
very limited.
Exactly. Not a very generous program. And it can go, once you lose the need for skilled care, the unskilled care goes away.
Wow. Right? And when you say skilled and unskilled, you mean skilled as in physical therapy?
Physical therapy, occupational therapy, right? Skilled nursing, if they need a tube put in,
that Medicare covers.
Medicare will cover that at home.
But unskilled would be?
Unskilled is going to the bathroom, changing if there's a diaper situation, getting in and out of bed.
So having someone like a home health aid assist. So Medicare
is very limited when it comes to that, and either between 0 to very little.
So here's an example. I've worked very hard. I'm a doctor. I have a house. Don't have a lot in the bank account, just enough like any average American, for example. I'm 70 years old. Everything's great. All of a sudden, I have a stroke. I have Medicare. I don't have anything else. I have supplemental, maybe plus minus. Maybe I have nothing. Nothing. And now I have a stroke and I'm home now. And I have a wife who's 70 as well. And she doesn't know how to take care of me, but someone has to turn me. Someone has to change me, right?
Correct.
Who pays for that now if I don't have Medicaid or anything else?
So there's a couple of ways. You're either privately paying.
So I would need to have a runway in my bank account as long as I live to make sure I can cover private hire.
And what people are doing is they're taking equity out of their home, or they're taking more money out of their IRA.
So if I wanted to leave the house to my kid as an inheritance,
now it's a problem.
Now I'm taking negative equity. I'm taking out equity from it. And my kid's not going to have equity in the house.
Correct.
And I'm going to have to sell it later on.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right.
Just to take care of me.
Just to get taken care of. That's right. And we see that too much because people don't know that Medicaid planning exists, and because they don't know about it, or there's a lot of misinformation, which is why I wrote the book. It really is to clear up a lot of bad information about Medicaid. Some people think you have to wait 5 years. You don't have to wait 5 years.
So in a Cliff Notes version, let's use that example. That 70-year-old doctor has a little bit of money in the bank. He does have a house. Let's say he has $50,000 to $100,000 in the bank. I say a little bit because if you take that 5, 10, 15 years of care, that's not going to last.
Correct. That's right.
And so when they turn to you, what's the process like? How can you help them? What resources can you get them?
Very fair. So let's start with the premise that a lot of something else that people don't recognize all the time is not all assets are countable. So interestingly, usually the personal residence, the homestead, is not counted as an asset.
Interesting.
If you're married, there's no equity limit. If you're single, you can't have more than $730,000 worth of equity. So for example, if you have an $800,000 home and a $100,000 mortgage, you're fine. If you have an $800,000 home, sometimes we are strategically taking out a little bit of equity and then to get under that threshold and then protecting the money as if it were in the bank, because I have wonderful strategies to protect 50, 100, 200, even 400, $500,000. Once we get much higher than that, it will be very fact dependent. At some point in time, we may want to take advantage of the fact. I mean, if someone comes to me with $2 million, we might say to ourselves, let's look at a 5-year irrevocable trust where we're going to plan on privately paying for the next 5 years. And we're going to think about what we want to leave in your name to cover those costs. And we're going to stow everything away, because after 5 years, everything in that irrevocable trust is in fact going to be invisible. Most of my clients can't wait 5 years. They come to me, they need Medicaid right now. And they have, like you said, they have their home, they have 100, 200, 300 grand in the bank, and that's going to go very, very quickly. We don't want to wait 5 years in that setting. So they're coming to someone like me, and we have state and federal rules that we can use to legally and ethically get that money out of their name in a way that's not considered a gift. A gift is all that's prohibited within 5 years. You can't just say, I've got 2 kids, I've got $200,000 in the bank, I'm going to give $198,000 and split it between my kids and call it a day, because if you do that within 5 years, that's a problem. We have all sorts of things we can do with a couple $100,000 that is going to be within the confines of Medicaid rules and not be considered a gift. And I like to make it clear to people who are watching, I don't hide anything from the government. I'll tell the government when we're filing an application, you're going to notice my client had $300,000 in the bank, and now they have $2,000, because you're only allowed to have $2,000 in what Medicaid considers to be a countable asset. And here's what we did with the money, and here's the corresponding state and federal law that says what we did was okay, and you cannot penalize my client for doing it. They all have pros and cons. I always tell my clients, I'm very straight up about that. I don't have a magic wand. I don't have like a magic trust I can put it in. Sometimes we use trusts. Sometimes we use what's called personal services contracts, where we're able to basically pay family members in advance for the work that they're doing anyway.
So it sounds like there's a lot of strategy, but there are options.
Correct.
It's like, not to go that route, but it's like paying for taxes, right? They say, oh, the wealthy don't pay for taxes. Oh, they're bad. No, it's because they've studied the strategy and what exists within the context of the law.
Right.
And then they say, okay, I'm going to use that to my advantage if it exists. That
is an incredibly spot on analogy, which is essentially what I'm doing is asset protection for the middle class, right? Someone who's worth $20 million, they go to a tax attorney, they go, how can I pay legally and ethically as little taxes as possible?
Right.
I'm doing the same thing for folks who are worth substantially less. And I would argue that when I'm protecting someone's last $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, it is a much more significant positive impact to their quality of life than, saving millions of dollars.
And it makes a lot of sense.
Correct.
And what we'll do is, I'm sure people are going to have more questions. I'm sure people are going to want to reach out to you. What's the best way? And we'll put that down in the link. But what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Sure. So we have first of all, I'm committed to free and low cost education. So my website, elderneedslaw.com, has articles. I promise it's not salesy. I'm answering very specific questions. I have a YouTube channel, which is at Elder Needs Law. If you just type in Elder Needs Law on YouTube, where I'm answering people's very specific questions. I'm trying to get good. And this book is, I forget what it is on Amazon. It's $15-$16 or something like that. It's really not, this is not a moneymaker. This is just to get good information out there. But if they go on the website, they can fill out a form, and then someone from my office will reach out to them. They can email jason@elderneedslaw.com or scheduling@elderneedslaw.com if they want to set up a consultation. And our phone number's on the website, and however people want to reach out to us, we're happy to. With humility. It's not just me. I have a phenomenal team supporting me. I have people who used to work for Medicaid that now work for me, and we're very, very good at reducing the time people are waiting to get these benefits, filing the application, dealing with the government, taking the headache of getting them access to these very valuable long-term care benefits.
Yeah, this was very, very resourceful, and I'm sure folks who are watching get a lot of value out of this, because you want to be in the beginning of the planning stages when you're dealing with a loved one and you're thinking about these things. You're thinking about, like to mention something, when you're thinking about assisted living. You said Medicare doesn't pay for an assisted living. And assisted living, depending on what type, can run anywhere from $3,000, depending on to 5, 7, 8, 10.
Sure.
Now you're like, all right, the $3,000 one makes sense for me. The $3,500 makes sense for me. Right. Well, these long-term care plans like Simply and Sunshine, they have a specific allocation
Correct.
for an assisted living. So if your
Correct.
loved one now needed an assisted living,
Yes.
because they have dementia and they need memory care,
Yes.
but if they didn't have Medicaid, it would be all on the burden of the family and the loved one's capital that they had. With your services, there's a way to get help that they, in a legal and a compliant way.
And you bring up a great point is Medicaid in an ALF setting, Medicaid is not necessarily contributing the full bill. So you're reliant on your income.
Social Security.
You're reliant on however you're getting income. So you have, so it could be IRA. By the way, IRAs are not counted as assets either. So people can come to me with very significant IRAs.
And it's not considered an asset.
As long as it's paying out money in order they're receiving their distributions. But yeah, and the income counts, and we have lots of ways of dealing with income. So let's just say their income plus what Medicaid provides. Medicaid provides, depending on where you are in the state, like where we are, Medicaid provides between $1,900 and $2,100 a month, typically, toward a participating assisted living facility.
That's significant, but that's still compared to nothing.
Right, and if that's the magic of Medicaid plan, where if they started out with a couple $100,000 and we found a way to protect it, so now that money is safe and can contribute toward the cost of care because Medicaid still might not be enough to cover the full bill, isn't that nice? We've stretched the dollar out so much further. What happens, sadly, is when people wait too long, they can't afford an ALF even with Medicaid, and then they're going into a nursing home because Medicaid does cover essentially the full bill in a nursing home, but no one wants to be there. Everyone, that's you go there. Listen, people will wind up there, whichever way we go, if that's what's safe for them. But there are plenty of people who, if you're in an ALF, it's a lot easier to age in place in an ALF. Once you're in, it's easier to stay than if you need nursing home care because you've waited too long at home or something like that. You're going to be, the facility's going to be, we can't handle you. And now you got to go to a nursing facility, or you can't afford an ALF anymore. Now you got to go to a nursing facility. So I hate the idea that people are going to these facilities prematurely when we have the ability to get them better care before they wind up.
This was super, super helpful, super educational to people listening. I learned a lot. My parents are in their 70s. I have a grandma who's 92. I took away a lot from this conversation.
I'm so glad.
I thank you so much. We're going to put the link on how to reach out to Jason and his team. If anyone has any questions, reach out to his website, Knowledge is Power, to the podcast. It's also very powerful. And then if you need that one-on-one conversation, highly recommend to get professional help. Begin with the end in mind. That's the thing I always live by. Begin with, if we know we're going somewhere, let's begin with that early on. So thank you so much for joining the show.
My great pleasure, Dr. Erik. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.